Most games fail at using difficulty in an interesting way. That's not to say difficulty in games is inherently bad, it's just something a lot of designers fail to correctly nail. For the most part, there is the intended route, usually normal or hard, with minor tweaks to the lesser or higher end of the scale, where enemies will act as damage sponges and supplies get scarcer, or the inverse, where you can mow down opponents with more ammo than you know what to do with. A lot of times, players have to rely on self-imposed restrictions for a more difficult experience with games that have no adjustable scale, like the 3-Heart Challenge in Zelda games, although recently the franchise saw a very slight shake-up with the introduction of Hero Mode in the HD remake of Wind Waker. While games like Pokemon can have a slight variation with inbuilt items like the XP share, which can either give one or all other party members the experience gained from a battle, regardless of if they fought or not, turning this item on or off can give a different scale of difficulty. Although for a greater challenge with Pokemon, a lot of players have turned to the self-imposed rule set of a Nuzlocke run, for a true hard mode style of play with the series. A fundamentally basic example of letting players choose their difficulty through no in-game menus is the mainline Star Fox games. Certain worlds have different paths and gateways to unlock, opening up harder routes if you've mastered a stage well enough to find them. Super Mario 3D World and Metal Gear Solid 5 have a sort of get-out-of-jail-free card with their white Tanuki suit and chicken hat respectively. They're fail states that say, well, you're not good enough to progress through this section of the game, so here, let's make it easy for you. And this really falls to the way of lazy game design. I never thought I'd say this, but Mario could take a hint from early Sonic games, where there are multiple paths through a stage, allowing for mastery of a level to be rewarded with faster times on runs, rather than just giving players a free pass. Metal Gear Solid 5 really has no excuse, as a pseudo-open world game such as this has multiple ways to tackle each objective, although the chicken hat can be turned off if the player so desires. Similarly, the white Tanuki suit doesn't need to be grabbed from its little item box, but even so, the temptation is often far too great after a few too many deaths and you just want to get this level out of the way. A game is most successful when it has a dynamic difficulty curve worked in organically, letting you choose the hard or easy mode as you play through the world, rather than picking an option from a menu, or even simply adjusting a game to be easier if a player cannot progress. Coming back to the Nuzlocke example, if Game Freak were able to implement a means to activate this in-game, say if the only way to turn on the normally self-imposed rule set is at the beginning of the adventure, like, for example, setting it in motion by winning your first rival battle, only catching the first Pokemon you see in the first route by the time you walk to the guy who teaches you how to catch a Pokemon, and have him say something along the lines of, "Oh, I see you're already experienced, do you want to try something different?" It's there for those who explore their surroundings to be rewarded with a new way to play, if they want to take it. World of Warcraft is surprisingly a game that has successfully pulled this dynamic difficulty curve off. Well, they did it once and I really wish they'd do it again. Now, the inner workings of World of Warcraft itself would almost require an entire video, since the way difficulties work are always changing almost every expansion. The only thing you really need to know is that for the sake of this discussion, there was normal 10-man and heroic 25-man difficulty for raiding at the time of Ulduar, the raid I'd like to go over. With that out of the way, let's look at the raid. Now, unlike raids before it, in Ulduar, each boss had a hard mode that needed to be triggered by specific events or approaches to each one. The first encounter, the Flame Leviathan, is set in motion by speaking to either Bran Bronzebeard or Lawkeeper of Norgannon, the latter setting in motion the hard mode fight. Hard mode itself can have even more of a sliding difficulty scale. After speaking to Norgannon, on the way from the beginning steps to the Leviathan, there are 4 towers. Each tower not destroyed increases the boss's health by 40%, allowing groups to decide on how much health they want the boss to have for the encounter. Algalon, the raid's optional boss, needs some mastery as the fight itself required defeating 5 different bosses on the raid's inbuilt hard mode. First, you had to defeat the Assembly of Iron, keeping a specific member alive till last, which gave a quest to retrieve 4 sigils from the next 4 bosses, the Watchers. Each of the Watchers' hard mode fights are triggered in incredibly varied ways. For example, for Freya's fight, all the tree elders must be kept alive, which meant she gained healing during the encounter, while also pulling abilities from the elders. Similar to the Flame Leviathan, Freya's difficulty could be adjusted by killing some or all of the elders in her room. Skipping back a few years to the early days of the SNES, Chrono Trigger helped define how a dynamic difficulty setting could work through its many different endings. After reaching the end of time portals, the game opens up and allows players to choose varying points in time to go, meaning you can get to the final boss only partway through the game. If you do this, you most likely will die if underprepared. But what this means is that at any time after reaching end of time, you can choose when you want to take on the final challenge if you feel prepared to, giving players a sense of freedom to choose how difficult they want the final encounter to be, with variables such as different party members, better stats, and items. The reward is multiple different endings spread across the varying times you can end the game. It's this kind of forward thinking I'm surprised we haven't seen more of since Chrono Trigger first came out. A game that recently has used the Foundation's Chrono Trigger layout, intended or otherwise, is Undertale. With the different route runs available, Pacifist, Neutral, and Genocide, the player can choose from the beginning how hard they want their experience to be, by either killing every enemy in sight or letting them all live, giving vastly different experiences depending on how you choose to tackle the beginning area of the game. Although this is really only available for the first area of the ruins, with the Neutral run being an exception, allowing more minor changes as you go, it is the most dynamic, as it is how most first-time players will approach Undertale. The Neutral run has the most wriggle room for being dynamic as you figure out on your journey the different ways enemies and bosses can be defeated, letting you choose if you want to brute force your way through a section or resolve them peacefully, or a mixture of the two. So what can we learn from this? If a game as hugely diverse as World of Warcraft that has incredibly strict rules of play can successfully manage to implement a dynamic difficulty scale, there is room for this in many other games. A menu-based difficulty setting is honestly just a lazy way to pad out a game with artificial hardness, created from just giving enemies more health or making supplies harder to find. While not inherently bad, too many developers are content with letting this way of thinking pass by, just turning the heat up or down on players. If it's done right, it is so much more interesting, and can lead to dynamic and diverse game designs.